Star Citizen development has always been riddled with talk of tools that will eventually speed up development. We've also heard of expected expansion as more content needs to be brought in more quickly. But the only places where the studio has gotten up to speed are ships and Planetary production, which we saw both speed up by leaps and bounds from 2018 to 2021. Planets and ships are very important in major parts of this game, but what about all of the smaller areas and activities that we get to play with as well? In 2022, it finally feels like the locations team, both in the EU and Montreal, have reached this same level of efficiency. And today I'm going to explain why I believe that, and what it means for the game. This is your 7th exclusive video of 2022. Thank you for supporting my Tomato Talks. Throughout the years between the end of Phase 1 around 2015 till now, we've heard about the tools being developed to help build this game in the future. This included things like the Gen 12 renderer, server meshing, the cloth tool, Planetary tech, building blocks, the subsumption editor, and many more. It's a bit of a joke in some ways, as there likely won't be any explosion of content, but rather a gradual ramping up as these tools mature. The studio was saying it, the backers were saying it, and just about everybody was hoping for it. While the scale of the game has changed, the goal of a massive, incredibly detailed verse never has. And it's always been a question of how CIG would manage to create enough interesting assets, locations, and content to fulfill that goal. The rate at which things were being added seemed to spell a never-ending development cycle. And even with increased numbers, there are only so many people you can throw at a video game. Our first locations were all handmade, and oftentimes used game systems that don't even exist in the game anymore, such as repair bots. Each of these locations was a test of some of their ideas for the game, and while they were all certainly interesting, they got old fairly quickly. And then Planetary came around and began to grow, and we started to see what these tools could really do. The first planetary landing we got to witness was Delamar, a large asteroid with an unaffiliated underground city. Compared to today, the textures, LODs, and overall graphic quality was abysmal, but it was impressive. It also took quite a bit of time to make. After we got access to the first few moons in the game around Crusader, the next planet was Hurston, and all of the moons associated. During the lead up to the addition, we got to hear a bit about the process of building both Hurston and Crusader, which was still 3 years away at the time, despite the devs already at work on the gas cloud tech that would eventually wrap the whole planet. We also got looks at Walla and Lyria during this time. They wouldn't be added to the game for a while, but we'll talk about that in a minute. All this time during this process, as the planets were being built and focused on, smaller features were seeing their own time to shine. The initial version of derelicts had been added to the game, though not with a systemic tool that could continue to make them. Armor, new mission givers, various props, small points of interest, and other things were also being developed, but not necessarily as the focus. The planet development team was hitting a lot of milestones and improving their work greatly in a way only matched by the ship team. The ship team was obviously the most important team in the founding years of the project, and their importance grew as the development increased towards the end of the 2010s. It was easy to see throughout the years that the company learned how to refine the process and make sure ships went from concept to complete as quickly and efficiently as possible. To this day, the process still isn't perfect, and ships are still being added that will need to see 1, 2, or even 3 passes to update them later. Regardless, the processes continue to improve, as do the ship designs, and as more features are brought online, they are implemented into the ship pipeline, and the team updates their tools. The ship team's tools and programs, while still in development, were a well-oiled machine in the late 2010s. Back to the planetary side of things, from the introduction of Lyria and Walla in September, it took 7 months for their full release in 3.5 the next year. Specifically speaking, Lyria, a single moon, took 2 people an entire month to make. By the time Microtech was finished production, the required 3 moons for the patch had been taken from concept to completion in 1 quarter, with one developer able to produce 2 moons solo in 1 month. This was a huge improvement to the planetary pipeline that meant greater diversity would be possible at increased speed. And throughout the years since, it has only improved, with the entire Pyro system being constructed over the last few years, and Nyx close behind. With planets being created so quickly, the question on backers' mind begin to be, how will they fill these spaces with interesting things to do? Most of the points of interest in Star Citizen are pretty generic. There isn't much variation in the bunkers, the outposts, or the derelicts of the verse. We learned time and again that during the production process of these areas, devs were hand-making everything, and even designing the assets for the first time in some cases. Despite all of the different models of derelict settlements and NPCs inhabiting them, there was never enough to make that a reality. Even as we started to see more additions to the catalog of locations we could visit, like caves, the amount of diversity that would be subsequently added was limited to a change in the entrance types. While the space station building system had been co-opted to build out these caves, the tool did not progress much past that initial alpha implementation to bring us more variety like ice caves or caves with water in them. In the same strain, when we look at the derelict ship building tool, it became apparent that the library of assets would still need to be built out, with only the Caterpillar really progressing. It's also possible the various orientations for each ship would also need to be predefined by artists before being procedurally placed, much like how Planetech works. Speaking of which, the Planetary creation tool would also be a roadblock for the derelict creation tool. Due to the constantly changing planet surfaces after every reset of the Planetary tool, it was never efficient to create a high number of derelicts that would need to be constantly reshuffled. In addition, the wear and tear feature that factors the surrounding biome into how your ship is affected that was added last year also needed to be able to greatly affect derelicts. Instead of some dirt on a Microtech green zone reclaimer, the planet will have determined vines to be growing due to the perceived age. Outposts have been around since the very first moons, and they've always been these very basic buildings on stilts that sometimes come in different orientations. The inability to easily flatten the ground for these buildings, the lack of assets, no real base building tool, and the inability of NPCs to walk on planet surfaces meant ground outposts were never able to expand past a simple pressurized room. But due to the expansion of the company and the outpost building Rastar tool, we can see a number of new outposts on the horizon, with the possibility of much more variety and our own chance to build bases in the future. It's safe to say that base and outpost building is another big part of the game that has benefited from the development of these tools. So what has actually changed in location development, and why am I so convinced? For starters, the biggest sign is in the development speed of these locations. Look at the concept art for the Boreal Stalker, or even closer to home, look at the old videos of derelicts we used to see. Then think about how many times you saw those same concepts move to the white box phase of development. Generally, even ships will see a turnaround of more than a few months from introduction to our first major looks at real development. But the derelict settlements introduced in January of 2022 were seen in full white box development by the next month. The same goes for the Reclaimer derelicts shown in the concept art in the same month, and the Mercury Star Runner derelict from the same time. In addition to these locations making great progress, there are multiple tools making the process faster and easier that we've seen in monthly reports. Rastar is a big help, which is the base building tool in the game. But Mighty Bridge has also recently met a huge milestone, and the procedural location tool was introduced to us in the March monthly report that makes things like dynamic foliage generation easier. It has become very clear the development surrounding these locations has changed quite a bit in the last year or so. Now you might be thinking, okay Keenan, but we've seen some cool locations added in the past with the expectation of gameplay, but those locations to this day remain unused. You'd be right. The cargo decks and Grim Hex location rework we saw in the past couple of years led nowhere. Yet. I believe they were added too early, but likely fit into a schedule for the locations teams, but not the gameplay teams. Regardless, things aren't the same as they were a couple of years ago. These locations are more than just locations now. They are full showcases. Derelicts are used to show off laser trip mines and new loot. Rivers are experimenting with strategically placed consumables to be found. New outposts and derelict settlements will be our first experiences with NPCs navigating planets. And new space stations are looking into better traversability and more exploration. The new location workflow seems to allow for a lot better partnership between gameplay and location as they are developed in tandem. Just to send this point home, we've seen in recent monthly reports that 3 new missions will be included with the new Reclaimer Derelict on arrival. And additional missions are being developed for more space locations as well. All of this seems to be largely due to the new Montreal locations team at Turbulent. This team got started at the beginning of last year working on the hospitals, which turned out to be amazing, building out the derelicts we've been seeing implemented this year, and working on building interiors for more gameplay in cities. These locations have been progressing well, and the EU team seems to be growing and progressing also. The large amount of devs behind these initiatives certainly does seem to be helping this effort, if not as much as the tool development. All of this is a very good sign for the game that has been lacking both in smaller points of interest and in a variety of missions. Many things from Gen 12 optimizations to a proper locations pipeline to the Planetary navigation mesh are coming together in tandem to push forward-facing content to the players like never before during the game's development. And the accompanying AI-driven missions are probably the biggest benefit of the whole thing. As I said in my first exclusive video from this year, the best thing that CIG can do for casual players of this game is build out more missions that can take advantage of all the small and underutilized features that have been added. This could be exactly what they're doing, but only time will tell. With the tools which build this game and the game engine itself finally maturing, I think we're primed to see quite a bit of variety and expansion in the next few years. And it won't end there. Remember that this is just a few of the many teams working on Star Citizen and Squadron 42. While I feel those areas of the game have some time before they catch up to the efficiency of the planet, ship, or location development, they still seem to be putting together some interesting additions of their own. All of this, of course, is just observations over the last several years, and I may be a bit off the mark on what exactly is explaining this big push into points of interest. But there's no denying that something is different, and it's good for the game. I'm interested in hearing what you think about these developments. And I'd like to thank you again for watching and supporting me. This whole business wouldn't be possible without you. As always, if you'd like to see more of these exclusive videos, check out the Perspective platform where you support me for the playlist. And check out the other benefits I provide, such as behind-the-scenes videos, more in-depth discussions, and my live monthly Q&A. Thanks again for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.